The smell of burnt sugar and hot rubber was Charlie Muller's favorite cologne. At 24, he was the youngest driver on Engine 4, known throughout the station for his boundless energy and the fierce, almost reckless dedication he brought to every call. He didn't just fight fires, he chased them, believing that the moment the alarm sounded, every second of his life had been preparation for the next. That belief ended abruptly on a cold October night while battling a 4-alarm chemical blaze at an abandoned warehouse complex near the docks. Charlie and his partner, Hank, were clearing the South Annex. The air was thick and corrosive. They were pulling out 2 maintenance workers who had been trapped beneath a collapsed shelf when the structure's main support beam, weakened by hidden heat pockets, gave way with a sound like tearing metal. Charlie heard Hank shout his name, but he was already moving, shoving the second worker toward the exit point. He felt the impact, not the clean snap of a cinematic injury, but a prolonged, crushing weight. For a terrifying, silent moment, Charlie thought he was buried alive. When the smoke cleared, Charlie was alive. The workers were safe, and Hank was dragging him clear. But the weight of the collapsed beam had done its damage. Charlie Muller, the fastest firefighter in the city, woke up in a sterile hospital room where the only remaining trace of the fire he remembered was the phantom pressure in his left leg, which was no longer there. Act 1, The Ash. The 6 months that followed were not about healing. They were about shrinking. Charlie moved back into his small, sunless apartment, and the world outside the window seemed to be moving in fast forward. His prosthetic leg, a marvel of titanium and carbon fiber, felt alien and heavy. It was a mechanical reminder that his identity, Charlie Muller, firefighter, had been amputated along with his limb. He saw his former life everywhere. The sirens wailing past his street were a mockery. Hank visited religiously, bringing lukewarm coffee and battle stories Charlie no longer wanted to hear. "They've got you listed as retired with honors, buddy," Hank said one Tuesday, awkwardly leaning on the kitchen counter, trying not to stare at the prosthetic propped against the wall. "I'm 25, Charlie muttered, staring at the television. "You don't retire at 25. "You did the bravest thing I've ever seen," Hank insisted. "You bought those guys time. You bought me time." Charlie slammed his coffee mug down. "I don't need a medal, Hank. I need to climb a ladder. I need to run into a burning building without worrying if my battery runs out." The truth was the physical limitations were manageable. The psychological ones were suffocating. The fire department had offered him a desk job, a paperwork purgatory, but Charlie couldn't stomach wearing the uniform without the capacity to run toward danger. He was a weapon that had been retired. One afternoon, a sharp, impeccably dressed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor showed up at his door. This was Sadie, a former department administrator who now ran a small, specialized consulting firm focused on getting injured first responders back into meaningful work. Sadie surveyed Charlie's apartment, the stacks of takeout containers, the blinds perpetually drawn, and didn't offer a single word of pity. "The department is proud of you, Charlie." "The city is proud of you," Sadie said, sitting uninvited on his worn sofa. "Now, we need to make you proud of you." "I have nothing left to give," Charlie said flatly. Sadie leaned forward, her gaze intense. "You think firefighting is about brute strength and speed? It's not. It's about communication, discipline, and the guts to walk into a place where others are running out. You still have the guts. You just need a new kind of fire to fight." She pulled a glossy flyer from her briefcase. "Motivational speaking." Charlie scoffed, reading the header. "Seriously? I'm supposed to tell people to follow their dreams? I just lost mine." "Exactly," Sadie said. "That's cynicism, that raw loss, that's authenticity. People, especially kids your age, are terrified of failure. They're scared of trying because they might lose something. You are living proof that you can lose everything and still stand up. You don't have to preach cliches. You just have to tell your story." It took weeks of badgering, but Sadie was relentless. She handled the logistics, insisting that Charlie wasn't selling inspiration. He was selling reality. His first engagement was at a community youth center, a small, stuffy room packed with restless teenagers looking anywhere but at the stage. Charlie, wearing a suit for the first time in a year, felt ridiculous. He felt naked. He started with the standard safety briefing he used to give, then tried to transition to heroic cliches about courage and never giving up. It sounded flat, manufactured, and untrue. He looked down, his hand resting on the carbon fiber housing of his prosthetic. He could feel the eyes of the teenagers judging him, not on his bravery but on his awkwardness. He panicked. He mumbled an apology and walked off the stage, leaving Sadie furious and the audience confused. "I can't do this, Sadie," he admitted later, sinking into a chair in her office. "I sound like a self-help tape. I was a firefighter. I lived on action, not words." "Your problem, Charlie," Sadie said patiently, "is that you are trying to be a motivational speaker. Stop. You're a storyteller, and you are censoring the best parts. You talk about the fire, but you skip over the ash. The ash is where the story is." Act 2, the embers. Charlie took Sadie's words to heart. He stopped trying to sound like a hero and started talking about the fear. He began practicing in front of a mirror, focusing not on the glorious moment of saving the maintenance workers, but on the agonizing, frustrating, humiliating moments that followed. He talked about the day he tried to tie his boots and failed 5 times. He talked about the rage he felt when he couldn't run to catch the bus. He talked about the deep, hollow silence that replaced the camaraderie of the firehouse. "I didn't lose my leg. I lost my purpose," he'd say to his reflection. And that was the hardest thing to save. He also began reaching out to teens online, those struggling with chronic illness, injury, or just the overwhelming pressure of high school. He saw a common thread, the fear of nonconformity. Hank, meanwhile, was Charlie's practice audience. He'd listened to Charlie's dry runs, sitting on the sofa, occasionally rubbing his own neck muscles nervously. "You're good, Charlie," Hank said one night, after a particularly raw segment about phantom pain. "But you know what kids need to hear. They need to know what you did when the siren stopped." "I sat on the couch and watched reruns," Charlie joked weakly. "No, you put the damn leg on. You figured out how to drive again. You found a way to use the adrenaline," Hank countered. "You found a new way to rush toward the fire, even if that fire is just your own doubt." This clicked. Charlie realized his resilience wasn't a sudden, grand act of heroism. It was the accumulation of a million tedious, painful choices to not give up. He crafted his new core message. Resilience is renewable. He started with smaller, less intimidating workshops. He'd walk onto the stage, not trying to hide his limp, but acknowledging it immediately. "I brought a visual aid," he would say, tapping his composite leg. "This cost a lot of money and technology, but the thing that holds this thing up? That's free. That's grit." The response was immediate and palpable. Where the cliches had been met with folded arms, the honesty was met with hesitant nods. Teenagers approached him afterward, not asking about the fire, but about the isolation. "How did you deal with losing your identity? How did you get over feeling like a failure?" Charlie's answers were simple. "I stopped trying to be the old Charlie. I started building the new one." Sadie secured him a major gig, speaking at the annual Career Day assembly at Crestwood High, one of the largest public schools in the district. This was his chance to reach an audience of hundreds of jaded, future-fearing young adults. Act 3, the spark. The lights in the Crestwood High auditorium were glaring. Charlie stood backstage, tightening the laces of his dress shoe, the one on his real foot. He looked out through the curtain crack. The auditorium was a sea of hoodies and backpacks. They looked bored, defiant, and anxious. He saw Sadie giving him a thumbs up. He saw Hank waiting by the sound booth, looking like a nervous parent. Charlie Mahler, the former Engine 4 driver, took a deep breath. This was his new alarm. He walked onto the stage, the rhythmic thumb tap of his prosthetic echoing slightly in the vast room. He didn't try to ignore the limp. He owned the uneven cadence. "Good morning, everybody," Charlie began, projecting his voice, but keeping the tone conversational. "My name is Charlie Mahler. Until a couple of years ago, when the alarm sounded, my job was to run toward the worst day of someone else's life." He paused, letting the statement hang. "I was obsessed with being the fastest. I was obsessed with the perfect 5-second transition from sitting in the truck to climbing the ladder. That 5 seconds defined me. I thought that if I was fast enough, strong enough, I was invincible." He walked slowly to the edge of the stage, and then one night the building came down, and I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't strong enough. I lost my leg, saving 2 guys who were trapped. He stepped back and lifted his trouser cuff, just enough to reveal the metallic joint of his knee. The collective slouch of the audience adjusted. They were paying attention now. They weren't seeing a speaker. They were seeing a former athlete who had broken. The physical loss, that was the easy part. The surgeons took care of the physical. The hard part was losing the narrative. The story I had for my life was gone. I was supposed to be a fire chief. I was supposed to drive that truck until I was 60. I was supposed to be a hero. He could see the recognition in the eyes of the students. The fear of having their own carefully constructed life plans, college, sports, relationships, crumbled before they even started. For months, I was useless. I was angry. I was terrified of what would happen next. I was living in the ash of the life I lost. And everything I tried to do felt fraudulent. I tried to do paperwork. I tried to cheer Hank on at the station. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw what was missing. Charlie walked to the center of the stage again. And that's the message I want you to remember. You are all focused on the future. You're trying to build this perfect identity right now. The perfect student, the perfect athlete, the perfect friend. You think if you lose that identity, if you mess up the GPA, if you don't make the team, if you lose the scholarship, that the entire building collapses. He spread his arms wide. It will. That's life. Buildings collapse. Dreams catch fire. You're going to fail. You're going to lose something that you thought defined you. But here is the secret that nobody tells you. Identity is renewable. He lowered his voice slightly, forcing them to lean in. When I was at my lowest, Sadie came to me and said, "You still have the guts, Charlie. You just need a new kind of fire to fight." She was right. The adrenaline I used to find climbing a smoky ladder, I found it again, learning to walk without wobbling. I found it when I finally learned to drive a stick shift with a prosthetic. And I found it here talking to you. He tapped his leg hard. This is not a weakness. This is a map. It shows every step I took to get here after I fell. Your scars, your failures, those aren't things to hide. They are your new map. They show you where you learned to build stronger supports. He finished with a direct, intense gaze across the auditorium. Stop focusing on the fire you wish you could have fought, and start focusing on the ash you have to build from. It might not be the life you planned, but I promise you, the life you build from the wreckage will be stronger, tougher, and more authentic than the one you thought you were supposed to have. Now go out there and start building. The auditorium was silent for 3 full seconds, and then the applause started, not the polite, obligatory claps for a visiting adult, but a genuine, powerful roar from the student body. As Charlie stepped off the stage, exhilarated, Sadie was waiting with a wide, satisfied smile. "That," she whispered, "was the perfect 5-second transition, Charlie. That was fire." He saw Hank immediately afterward. Hank didn't speak. He just wrapped Charlie in a fierce, bone-crushing hug. "You're still fighting the good fight, man," Hank murmured into his shoulder. "It's just different tools now," Charlie replied, feeling lighter than he had in years. He wasn't Charlie Mahler, the broken firefighter. He was Charlie Mahler, the survivor, the speaker, the builder. Later that afternoon, as they were packing up, a young woman with bright purple hair and a shy expression approached him. "Mr. Mahler?" she asked, clutching a notebook. I'm not a great student. I mean, I love science, but I keep failing chemistry. I thought if I didn't get into the top school, I was done. Charlie rested a hand on her shoulder. Did the building collapse? She shrugged helplessly. Kind of. Good, Charlie said gently. Now you know exactly where the weak spot was. Rebuild the foundation differently. Find a new way to rush toward that chemistry lab, even if you have to walk slowly. You don't need perfection. You need persistence. The girl smiled, a genuine, hopeful flash of teeth. Thank you, Charlie. Watching her walk away, Charlie finally understood. He hadn't been retired from service. He had simply been reassigned. The alarm still sounded every day, not for a warehouse fire, but for the quiet, internal struggles of people afraid their dreams were gone. His new job was simply to remind them that the bravest thing you can do, after the flames have passed, is to start building something beautiful right there in the ash. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.